We reached out to people on the season pass group and we asked their Kings Island stories, and we got a huge response. Here are their stories. Hello, everybody. Alongside Don Helbig, I'm Ryan Sir, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics, the podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans, because that's who we are and that's who we care about. Now, Ryan, these stories that we asked the Kings Island Season Pass Facebook group, there's so many that came in that we had to divide this up into a couple of different episodes. So this is a part one of that. But let's get started, Ryan. What's the first story we have?
Yeah, thanks to the our partners at the season pass group on Facebook, by the way, for this. But Shayla Merrill. She said, I remember the very first time ever going to Kings Island with my grandparents. I was around 5 or so, I would say. My favorite core memory is always getting the famous blue ice cream on our way out. And of course, riding the Scrambler, the now Monster and Adventure Express. I know it may not sound super exciting, but it's a memory I will never forget no matter how old I get. That was 20 years ago. I mean, there's nothing about it being super exciting. I mean, my first ride ever at Kings Island was Shake, Rattle, and Roll. That's not the most exciting ride, but I'll always remember it because that was my first ride. Clearly, these resonate with you, and I think it's very cool that they do. It doesn't have to be your first ride on Banshee that's so exciting.
No, and it's something that, this is over 20 years ago. And it's still a vivid memory, and that's what a visit to Kings Island is about, is making those memories with family and friends, and this is the kind of story that you like seeing and hearing about.
Absolutely. What's the next story, Don?
We have Catherine Megan. She says, my kids have been through a rough year and a half with their dad and I divorce. They did so well in getting through it, so I promised myself I would focus my time with them on making memories. They rode Diamondback for the first time this year, and I remember looking over at my oldest as we started driving toward the station, and she was just laughing and tearing up. I remember thinking to myself, this is how memories are made, and just how happy they were at the entire experience. What year we have season passes, fast passes, so here's to even more memories. So, again, another really good story. How Kings Island, it's kind of made a difference for someone.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that I want to emphasize to you, Catherine, is there's always adversity in life. The kids are obviously aware of the divorce, and it's almost certainly very tough for them. But when they look back on their childhood, that's not what they're going to think about. They're going to think about the time they rode Diamondback with their mom, and how if even if it's subconscious, like obviously going to the park for me and for you and for everybody else, in some ways it's an escape from the day-to-day mundane or the bad stuff that happens. So I feel like you're doing the right thing, and it's a fantastic and it's a healthy coping mechanism. All right. Laura, I feel like we're on an episode like Frasier, when people would call in and give psychological advice. That's what I feel like now. But yeah. Laura Myers Webb. Throughout the early part of my childhood, we only went to KI one day per year on P&G dividend days when my grandma got free tickets as a P&G employee. My parents were excessively frugal. Imagine my surprise when one random summer day when I was 10 and my parents said they were going to Kings Island today and were getting season passes. I remember asking why, because it was so out of the norm for them. After that, all I thought throughout my preteen and teen years into my 20s. And then with my own kids, I was there just about weekly. We're now out of the state and closest to Carowinds, but KI will always be my home park. We were a once a year family too. And I think that the people that were once a year families are the ones that end up like with Kings Island podcasts and stuff.
Yeah, I was too in the 1970s. That was the big thing that we did every summer, as we got to go to Kings Island once. And yeah, I mean, now I know Laura. I remember, when she was in her teen years, with the season pass, she would watch a lot of the shows, and sometimes she would, go over to the racer and ride some racer rides with me. But yeah, I mean, I remember when she was growing up, and Kings Island was such a big part of her life. And I've seen her a couple of different times coming back from North Carolina to visit Kings Island. So yeah, I mean, a lot of really good memories there for her.
Fantastic. I think you have the next one.
Kate Denny, she says, my middle kiddo is so timid and shy. The first time we went to Kings Island, she cried.
Oh,
Actual tears streaming down her cheeks on the antique cars. It took her all of the 2023 season and spring of 2024, but she slowly made her way through the rides until she now runs to get in line for Drop Tower, Orion, or a night ride on the Beast. She'll ride anything in the park. Conquering these fears and proving herself to be brave has given her so much self confidence and determination. It makes me so proud of her. Now, this is a great story, and I can identify with this. Having a child that was kind of reluctant to go on some of the rides, and then once they do, it was nonstop.
yeah. It's funny how you have to walk that line too, where you got to convey that it's not that bad. You can do this. Well, at the same time, you don't force them to do something because then they're really not going to enjoy it. But it's got to be a proud moment as a parent to to see their kids overcome their fears. I don't have kids, but you watched your daughter grow up. I'm sure there was a time when she was afraid and she got over her fears and stuff. I mean, it's kind of different for some of these kids now because I mean, your daughter grew up in the park, I'm sure.
Oh yeah,
So she was always exposed to it. But for me, like I remember thinking that people that rode the vortex had to have been insane with a death wish. You know, I don't know. All right, next up, we have Laura Stokes, and Laura actually was kind enough to supply a photo here. Says my oldest son has anxiety and never did I think he would conquer anything taller than the racer. But the other day, his brother kept going, try this. Usually he goes no good, uh, but he surprised us and said, "I'll do Orion." This was after he tried Diamondback in the morning. So I bought them single use fast lanes and they got on, and my mama heart was sad and happy. Sad I just lost my people watching partner, but happy his brother gained a riding partner besides his dad. He's now conquered more coasters. So proud he is coming out of his shell. Well, a good step in the right direction was the whole Diamondback thing. I mean,
yeah,
but yeah, it's Laura, we're very happy for you, and it's all you have to do is like just that one little foot in the door, and that's going to be what really moves us forward as far as uh being afraid or not being afraid or whatever. But no reason to be sad. I mean, I understand you're losing your people watching partner, and that's kind of sad too. But I think that you should be really happy for him. I think that it's super exciting, and it's nothing but a good thing in my opinion.
it looks like we've developed another guest that just loves riding Diamondback in the morning.
We, yeah, well, the morning does give the best Diamondback rides, from what I've heard. I've heard.
All right, moving on, we have Whitney Niece,
Hmm.
and she says our 10-year-old Lincoln has discovered a newfound love and slight obsession for roller coasters this summer. After getting the all clear from his cardiologist to ride anything he wanted, he set out on a mission. What started out as an absolute no, and that's too big of a hill, he quickly started to conquer his fears. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see a photo here that was supplied. So, starting slow on Woodstock Express, then Snoopy Soapbox Racers, he quickly moved up to the bigger rides. The Beast became his favorite, with the Racer Mystic Timbers following closely behind. I love this, a wood coaster fan. Uh, we've loved seeing his face light up with excitement and eagerness to ride again and again. His next goal was Banshee. He came close Friday night, but was still hesitant. His knowledge of everything Kings Island is quite impressive. He often says, I feel right at home at Kings Island. Love this story.
He went from Snoopy Soapbox Racers to the big rides. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, if I've ever heard of one. You
Yeah,
know,
great photo though too. I mean, you can just see that you know how excited he is to be in the station there and getting ready to ride the beast.
yeah. And the advice I would get, and I would hope that Whitney and whoever else, when they're talking about their kids, would show them this episode. But Lincoln, it's the rides are safe. So you just got to trust them and just hop on Banshee, man. If you can do Beast, you can certainly do Banshee. Now, Banshee does go upside down and stuff, and I understand that there's a certain anxiety behind that. But once you experience it once, you'll know that something like Banshee, especially, it's less about the thrill and more about like exhilaration. It's about that sensation of flying. You'll love it. And as soon as you ride, we want to hear about it too, by the way. Cool. Next up from Michael Isham said, too many memories here to pick just one. Annual visits to the park as a kid. We typically went once a year during the summer, riding King Cobra with my dad, riding the Smurf boat ride as a family, and always ending the day with a ride on the carousel before the fireworks. KI has changed so much over the 30 years I've been going. 15 of those as a pass holder. Uh, it's so funny that I'm old enough, and Michael, I do know, and I think he's right around my age, but the King Cobra is one of those rides where I remember it like it was yesterday, but a lot of people don't even know it existed, you know? But I never did ride the Smurfs Enchanted Voyage. My first year there, they had Phantom Theater. So
Yeah,
I
you
guess
missed out.
I've seen POVs and stuff. I really do believe I missed out.
Yeah, but you talk here. I mean, Michael mentions the fireworks, and that's
Mhm.
another reason why, since 1972, when the park is closed at 10 o'clock at night or later, there's, been the fireworks. It's just, tradition. And, again, here's somebody that, that stands out for them is those
Mhm.
nighttime fireworks and spending the whole day there and kind of capping off a fun and memorable visit with those fireworks.
Yeah, totally. What's next?
We have Danielle Benignas, and Kings Island, she says, has played an enormous role in my early passion for amusement park history when I was a kid in the 1980s. The Grand Carousel, in particular, fostered this, teaching me an immeasurable amount about the Philadelphia Toboggan Company that built it, the carvers that created the horses nearly a century ago, and the phenomenal Wurlitzer band organ that also introduced me to popular music of the era. Decades later, I'm still involved in the preservation community, now extending to architecture, conservation. We're so fortunate to have this true gem of a park.
Yeah, I'm so glad we have like a for real even if we had a carousel from 72, that just wouldn't be the same because that would be more of a merry-go-round than a carousel, regardless of the direction it spins, by the way. But it I, if we got one in 72, that's beyond the era of wood carved horses, right? Like they would
Right.
probably be fiberglass horses and stuff.
Fiberglass, right?
But yeah, I share in your passion of the Grand Carousel, and
I do too.
I enjoy it as a ride. But I my passion for the carousel is as a work of art. The individual carved horses. If I ever get a house, I want to have one of the horses in the bay window. There's some house like somewhere around Kings Island. I can't remember where it was, where they had a bay window that was like up on the second floor, and there was a carousel horse in it. And that was like 25 years ago. I saw that, and I was like, I'm gonna do that someday. Um, uh, hey, an easy one to read, but a happy one. Lindsay Marie. Actually, before we get too far, I want to make sure that I include the photo because the photo is going to be very important to understand the dictation of what's going on here. Stand by. But Lindsay Marie said, she said, we got engaged on the train in May. The train was our first ride together back in Winterfest. That is so cool. I never thought about getting engaged on the train. I always thought like the Eiffel Tower would be the place for that. But
No, I think the
congratulations.
train, the carousel, I think those would be the two things, or maybe at the top of the lift hill of the beast, would come to mind. But no, the train's the perfect ride to do that. The fact that your first ride was together at Winterfest, I mean, what a charming time to ride the train, right?
Yeah, I wonder if they met on the train or if this was like an early date and then they rode the train or something. I don't know, but congratulations. You got to have a Kings Island themed wedding now, It's the rules.
No, I mean, I mean, again, all these different stories, they're different that were submitted. And, but, to have somebody, that 20, 30 years from now, they'll be able to say our love story began at Kings Island.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. You've got the next one.
Adam Connor, he says, my favorite moment was my first ride on the racer. I remember my first ride too. He said, my first roller coaster I ever rode. Same for me. He said, my mother and I came to Kings Island. I was just 7 years old at the time. The racer train was blue and backwards at the time. Now, when they had the backwards, there was a blue and a red on each side. So we got on the blue train.
Mhm.
He said that first click was the feeling of excitement for me, as I'd never been on any ride ever at the time. The racer seemed larger back then. Little LOL. Yeah, I mean, I remember when it was the biggest ride in the park. He said, so as we clicked into our seats, we had the ride attendees check in our restraints and seat belts as the bars came down. The locking of the bars in place was cool. I was riding in middle of the train backwards as I was looking around at my surroundings and seeing everyone else excited to ride as well. I saw the red and blue trains, the attendees thumbs up, saying all clear. A repeat of all clear and sounds of the air came out. We started moving backwards, but forward, if that makes sense. I know what he's talking about there. He said, as we came around the bend, the other coaster side was side by side as we went up the lift hill. The clicking of the lift hill as we went up, people telling each other they were going to win back and forth. He said, we got to the top of the track, seeing the park off to my side. He said, we went down the hill, picking up more speed. And as we hit the bottom with little shaking, we came up another hill and down again. He said, I was laughing, carrying on, while my mother was acting like I was going to fall out. He said, I had major excitement on my face as we finished the rest of the track. I begged my mother to go back in line for um, the racer facing forward. He says, I'll never forget my first ride. Then after that, my brother Garrett and I went to the Son of Beast, which I ended up riding 6 times in a row because I couldn't get enough. Uh, Love stories like this, where you're talking about your first ride. Racer's a great first ride. I think he wrote it backwards, so he gets to see kind of the park in a different way. I remember my first ride getting to the top of the lift hill, and you look out and you just saw how big the ride was at that time, and the other hills that were to come and all that. But no, it's always a special memory. Your first roller coaster ride, and when you do it on something that has the history that the racer does, I mean, that makes it even more special.
First person that I've ever heard say, what's their exact quote? I don't want to misquote him or anything. It was about Son of Beast. So I couldn't get enough of it.
Yeah.
I Anytime I've heard those words put together, it's like I wrote Son of Beast and I had had enough. Yeah.
Well, I
But
mean, you got to consider, he hadn't ridden many coasters at that time, so was probably able to take more of the pounding.
That's true, but, some people were very big loyalists to Son of Beast, so I don't wanna rip on him for that, but that's very cool. It's people's memories of overcoming their fears that
Yeah,
seem to be the memories that stick out the most, so I
yeah.
think
But I
that's
like the
awesome.
ones too that their first ride was with one of their parents or their grandparents.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next.
Um, what do you want? Andrea Hale?
Hmm.
Yeah, from the time I was 9, my parents took me to Cedar Point. I didn't have my first visit till I was 16. I didn't make it back until my 20s. I had fun on Vortex and King Cobra, but it wasn't until my granddaughter turned 4 that she started coming to the park. The next year, we bought gold passes. I will forever remember all those times at the park. Last year, my son and husband passed. Oh, I'm so sorry. Um, KI became our happy place to relive the good times we had. Our first trip, I played the bucket game and kept the ball in, or to keep the ball in. I won for the first time. It was like my husband was looking down and said, I'm watching you and don't give up. We do the payment plan because of income. We continue to make memories. I didn't get to Winterfest because I had a kidney transplant on December 15th. I plan on being at Winterfest this year. We finally ran into Don Helbig on the train last month and enjoyed our little chat. Treasure the good memories. I loved roller coasters growing up, but now They don't like me. I ride water rides and a few others now. I watch my daughter and granddaughter, who's 7, ride the coasters to see them happy, and it makes it worth it. That's a super touching story. First of all, I hope the kidney transplant's going well. I mean, that was a little of a bomb, too, but, um, it's another case of, you know, escaping the regular world, because sometimes the regular world sucks. And it's a you go there and you forget about your problems at least for a few hours, and there's whole charity like A Kid Again and Give Kids the World are based on that predicate.
Hmm.
So Andrea, we're completely with you. That's awesome. Don, do you remember meeting Andrea on the
I
train?
do. I do. And, we had a nice conversation. And, uh, yeah, I mean, those are the kind of things for me too. Like when people ask me about my memories, it's not always the rides, and that's a lot of times it's the people that I met, had conversations with, and just seeing how they were enjoying their day, or just what the park meant to them. So yeah, I definitely remember that conversation, and be sure to say hi if you see me in the park again.
Yeah, like I said, my one of my fond my favorite day at Kings Island was the Robbie Knievel thing, like, out the door, but my favorite, like, individual snapshot memory was the day before Ride Warrior weekend, and a bunch of my friends were coming into town from Florida and North Carolina and stuff for that. We all met at the park the day before. It was pouring down raining, and we were just sitting on the rocking chairs on the front of, what's now, like, Antique Photos. I don't remember if it was Antique Photos then or not, and just shooting the S, shall we say. And it was just such a good memory and nothing to do with rides. In fact, the day was a bust, rained out, but one of my best memories. And, that's what really matters with it. What's next?
We have Jim Flugel. He says, so many memories made from my working days and general public appearance or experience days. One of my fondest memories was my 50th birthday in 2022, which was also the park's 50th anniversary of KI. And seeing 50 around the park to just remind me I'm turning 50 at the end of the year. He says, so as you can guess, my birthday is New Year's Eve, and plan to have a family table at the International Restaurant for the buffet dinner, and then going to see the live shows and being picked for being Scrooge for What the Dickens, and then at Tinker's Toy Factory. I got a few bags of candy and having a theater and some cast sing me happy birthday. And then to cap off the night was being in the parade float, throwing out candy, and then just enjoying the rest of the evening, spending time with my family. And then the fireworks, always my favorite, to end the night. Such a great memory.
Yeah, they sure went out of their way for you on your birthday, Jim. Good Lord.
Well,
Um,
Jim's a figure around the park that everyone knows who he is, and very supportive of the park. Always has been. The fact that he turned 50 the year the park turned 50, I think that's kind of a special memory right there. So yeah.
yeah, very cool. And happy belated birthday, Jim, by the way. Karen Siefner Hoplite. One of my earliest memories of KI was riding the racer with my dad in 1975. He was about 250 pounds, and there were no seat belts, no high back seats, and one lap bar. The good old days, as you're talking about. The racer
The
got
glory
halfway up
days.
the glory days. The racer got halfway up the hill before a sensor buzzed because our lift bar wasn't secure. A worker came up the hill and gave the lap bar a few good whacks, and it was all good. Oh, how safety was a bit different back then. Yeah, a lot different back then. And I don't discredit the story. It's probably true. Now, the only thing that I don't think is correct is I don't think that there was a sensor at the time that would say that there was a lap bar that wasn't all the way up. But what I think might have happened was
They
they
might have caught
dispatched the
that.
yeah, they dispatched the train and the driver saw it and saw like it wasn't down far enough. And then when they're on the lift hill, he's like, you know what, I'm not comfortable with this, which is still a pretty good eye, because the easy thing to do would have been to let him go.
Yeah.
Probably nothing's gonna happen, but good for them.
Yeah, there were some inconsistencies with the buzz bars too, on how far they would come down on different seats, and
Yeah.
some of them would come down to almost your knee. So you would
Yeah.
see sometimes guests would uh, put their knee up a little bit. So when the ride operator came by, if they weren't pulling up on it and just kind of like touching it, sometimes the train would start to go to the station, and then the associate at the control would notice that it wasn't locked. So those kind of things did happen. I think the way it is right now, you talk about safety being different. I mean, everything is secured. Your seatbelts, everything. The computer system is telling the right operator, what's what. It's not going to let you dispatch if somebody's not locked in. Those were not the days back in 1975.
Yeah. All right, next up.
Bob, I'm going to say is it Prizer? Bob Prizer. He says, being at the park with my whole family for the whole day from open to close. He said it was such a great time. We'll always treasure that time. It was during the 50th anniversary celebration, and it was so awesome seeing Barry Williams. There's a memory too. I mean, if you grew up, a fan of Kings Island, you saw the Brady Bunch episode, to see Barry Williams at the park, for the 50th anniversary. That's a special time too.
That day I will never forget. That's a top 5 day. And it's not about Barry Williams, but I just remember seeing Fun Fireworks in 50 for the first time, and just after the show, like, everyone was just like, "What did we just see?" And because you were taken on such a ride. It was like 20-25 minutes long. The drones for the first time. And then on top of that, the whole thing with Barry Win and honestly, I mean, you and I have had a lot of exposure to Barry Williams over the past 15 years or so. So I wasn't super interested in Barry Williams, but the guy that produced the show kind of like took it over. Like, I don't mean that insulting, but I was far more interested in what that guy had to say about Fun Fireworks in 50 than what Barry Williams had to say. Because I honestly don't think that Barry Williams has like super distinct memories of Kings Island from 1973, because it was just so long ago and it was one day. Like, he probably has more connected memories of when you brought him in. But yeah, that was such a then so I want to know. So Bob, what was your initial thoughts when you saw Fun Fireworks in 50? Did you stick around for that? Because I remember like everyone was like just at a loss for words, and it was just odd silence for a few moments after the show ended before the clapping started.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
phenomenal, that show.
Oh, so good. Next up,
We
Brooke
have Brooke
Long.
Long. Yeah, she says, I decided to get over my fear and ride Banshee today so that I love it. Ended up riding 3 times. It was the first ride of the day, and I got the very front seat with my mom and cousin. Then we left the park with it as the last ride. I cannot wait to ride it at night the next time I go. I used to hate roller coasters, but now I think I actually love them. She said, I got the very front row on the green train, 3 seats to the right.
Yeah. Banshee at night's a very cool experience, but isn't it cool? Don, when did you like one of your first rides at Kings Island? Did you or your one of your first visits, did you ride like a big coaster or something, like something that you worked the wheel up to ride the racer or something like that?
Well, it was the racer because
Was it your
my
last
first,
ride of the night?
yes, it was. I rode it 9 times that day in 1972. I'd never been on a roller coaster in my life, so it was the first one I ever went on. It was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon before I got my first ride on it. My cousin had to pay me 50 cents to do it, which at
Mm,
that time, when you're that age and 50 cents was a lot of money, back in that day for me. I made that cutting the grass a couple of times a week. So I was coaxed into it. I thought, okay, at 50 cents, I can go buy a hot dog, during the days. But after my first ride on it, I was terrified. Going up the lift hill, I mean, I was white knuckling the lap bar. But after the first ride, I was hooked. I loved it. Couldn't get enough of it. So ride it 9 times that day. But my first ride was the they're spinning keggers.
yes.
So I was riding the flat rides. I was riding that rides I had grown up with it since I was Coney Island. I was riding those again. The carousel, the log flume, the turnpike cars. Rides like that I had known. Was familiar with from the Coney Island days. That's where I was spending most of my time while I gathered up the courage to ride the racer.
Yeah. Did you make him pay you 50 cents for all 9 rides? Like, did you make
No,
4.50 off of
no,
them?
no, no. They were kind of wanting to ride other things, and I was like, "Come on, Paul, we got to ride again." And my brother was too small to ride. He wasn't, tall enough yet. He was maybe 4 or 5 years old at the time. My other cousin Mark, he was interested in the games and was playing a lot of those, but he would ride with us. We switched off and on where I'd ride with my cousin Paul or my cousin Mark, and um, yeah, I mean, it was just I didn't want to leave that ride. I wanted to stay with it, for most of the rest of the day. I still rode some other things around it, but Yeah, finished up the night, and those were my first ever night rides on a roller coaster too. So that was fantastic, and what a difference that was too. Those first night rides.
Yeah. My first ever visit to Kings Island, I worked up the courage to ride the backward racer at the very end of the night. So, all right, next up, Larry Stidham. So, we always went to the Swordsville Lake when I was little. When Kings Island opened, I was 7, and we went soon after opening day. I remember riding the racer and I was blown away. I'll be 60 next month and still riding, but now with my grandson. I love those stories. My best memories now are when he was finally tall enough to ride the big rides. We go there often and ride everything and enjoy a couple shows and some lunch and have a blast.
That's what it's all
Multi-generational.
about.
That's what we love
That's
to
what it's
hear,
all
you
about,
know.
right? Just this story right here. That's what Kings Island is all about. And you notice, Ryan, a lot of these stories, they tie in the racer as being part of those memories.
Non coincidentally, you picked these stories, so we know how you feel about the racer.
No, these stories were all plucked. I mean, you can go to the season pass page and you can see, that we went right down the line and just, you had a story, we were going to use it. Um, so it
I
wasn't like because
was
you used the racer, you didn't get picked because you used, you mentioned the racer, you got picked because you submitted a story.
all right. Next up, Carolyn Russo. She's here to
Yeah,
talk about
Carolyn
other
Russo.
rides besides the racer.
She is. She said, I rode the Vortex so much because I wanted to relive the memories of my first ride in 2010 that turned me into a thrill seeker. She said, I rode it 1,221 and a third times. I like the third times,
She got
including 93.
evacuated, from what I understand, so
Yeah,
it didn't
yeah.
count as a whole cycle.
No, no, including 93 in one day. Yeah, you have to leave the lift hill to be considered a ride. Anywhere after that point, it's considered a ride if you clear the lift.
Yeah.
She said, now that Vortex is gone, and I want to mention again 93 in one day. Wow, that's a lot of rides on Vortex. She goes, now that Vortex is gone, the Bat has since become my record breaking ride. And she says, my appreciation for it has skyrocketed over the past couple of years. Underrated ride. It really is. It's funny, like
Yes.
getting back there, and it really can only be found by those that already know where it's at, almost one of those kind of things. She said, I currently sit at 2,813 rides. I rode with Carolyn earlier this summer on her 2,000th ride. So, she's been racking them up this summer. She was, I've ridden it 1,301 times so far this year alone. And I've twice set a record for most rides on the Bat in one day, 87 on August 5th, up from 82 on August 1st, 2023. She said, I hope to hit 3,000 lifetime rides by the end of this season. I would absolutely be still doing this type of thing on the Vortex if it were still there. And she goes, and who knows how high that count would be today. So she had what was her count there? She had 1,200,
Mhm.
years. She'd probably be over 3,000, 3,500. Um, she said so. That's been really neat to carry on those records on the Bat.
Yeah. I couldn't see myself riding the Vortex more than once in a visit, if that. The Bat
Yeah,
I can be on board with. I love the
I,
Bat.
I had 1,199 rides on the Vortex. I had a chance to be on the last train, but I opted instead to capture photos and video of that last cycle.
Well, and also it's kinda like it if it was the last cycle of the racer, it probably would have meant a lot more to you than the last cycle of the vortex too. I think I'm in the same camp as a lot of people. We're finding out less and less people, but I miss having the vortex. I don't miss riding the vortex because I always thought it was so uncomfortable, but it was such a beautiful ride and so perfectly placed. Just the whole back of the park was just this mess of twists and loops and stuff. And
Hmm.
I remember really enjoying it when I was younger, but by the time I turned like, 25 or so, that the vortex days were pretty much over for me, except for
Yeah.
the occasion.
When I knew what Carolyn was trying to do, I stopped riding it in August. I knew the ride was going to go away, but I rode it one time to take it to 1199, but I didn't want to get into the 1,200. I wanted Carolyn to make sure clear cut she had the record for the most rides on it, but also to be in that exclusive club. She was the only one that had over 1,200 rides on it.
Yeah. I assume that anybody that's ridden that much would probably like know because you'd have to make a conceited effort. Like
You
even if you
did.
go, there are a lot of people that go. I mean, there were like the 2014 season, I made like 100 visits, but I wrote Banshee a lot because it was new that year, but I mean, I didn't write it 1,000 times. I didn't write it 90 times, you know? You have to
That's a
make a
commitment.
concerted effort. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a commitment. All right,
All right.
what's the last story we got here?
Last one we have for this one. It's Laura Renee Clifford. On May 31st, 2019, I was in line for Diamondback, and some people we had just met were in line with us and seen someone at the top of the stairs they knew and said hi. After getting off the ride, the person waited, so I was introduced to him. We hung out for a pass holder event that night for ERT after the park closed. 6 days later, we went to Kings Island together on our first date. Fast forward 5 years later, we're still together. Congratulations. Hey, you have Kings Island in common. That's a good first step.
It is, again, another good story. We've found, a lot of people, over the years that you and I have talked to that, uh, ended up meeting their
Mhm.
spouse, significant other at the park. Some of them have gotten married, they have kids and things. Yeah, I mean, it's and that Kings Island's always going to be part of their life. When you meet that way.
Absolutely. Now, clarify, of course, we got so many responses. This is part one. In a couple days, we're going to drop part two with more of your stories. But before we go anywhere, Don, tell us about the t-shirts.
Tower Topics T-shirts, very popular. Tower Topics T-shirts, very popular item. You can get one yourself. It's just $22. That includes shipping. If you're interested, send us a direct message on our X, which is tower_topics. We'll send you a QR code, and once the transaction has been made, we will get that shirt out to you in just a matter of days. It comes in a Carolina blue. It's a great looking T-shirt, very comfortable to wear, and you'll join the growing ranks of those that own a Tower Topics T-shirt.
Fantastic. We'll see everybody in a couple days. I'm Ryan Cern along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.